Y'all. Herbo just sat down and revealed something the streets were never supposed to hear in full. For years we only got pieces, short quotes, emotional interviews, bits and pieces about what King Von told him. But this time Herbo didn't hold back. He played the full conversation. And according to what's now circulating, Von's warning was a lot longer, a lot darker, and a lot more specific than anyone publicly knew. The moment the clips started spreading, the timeline froze. Fans who thought they had heard every Von story were suddenly quiet. Because this wasn't just another tribute. This was Herbo saying Von looked him in the eye and told him things that still sit heavy years later. Names weren't thrown around lightly. Situations were described in detail. And the tone of the warning? Cold. Clear. Like a man who already felt the walls closing in. People are already arguing over what it means. Some say it changes everything we thought about Von's final months. Others say it only confirms what the streets had been whispering. But one thing nobody can deny, the full conversation is out now. And once you hear how long that warning actually was, you won't look at the story the same way again. Buckle up. This one cuts deep. The moment Herbo started talking, you could hear the difference in his voice. This wasn't the usual interview energy. This wasn't a quick rest in peace mention or a short story thrown in for emotional effect. He leaned forward, slowed down, and made it clear he was about to say something he had been holding for a long time. According to the full conversation now circulating, Herbo said Von didn't just give him a short warning. He sat with him and broke it down in a way that still sits heavy years later. Herbo described the setting first. It wasn't in a studio. It wasn't on a stage. It was a quiet moment, away from the cameras and the noise, when Von looked at him and started talking in that low, serious tone people who really knew him recognized. Herbo said the conversation stretched longer than most people ever realized. Von wasn't speaking in vague codes. He was laying out how he felt the energy shifting around him. He talked about who he trusted, who he was starting to question, and how certain moves were beginning to feel calculated instead of loyal. That part alone was enough to freeze the timeline. Because for years the public only got fragments. A short quote here. An emotional recollection there. Never the full length of what Von actually said. Herbo made it clear the warning wasn't a single sentence. It was a full conversation that kept going, circling back to the same uncomfortable truth. Von felt like something was off, and he wanted the people closest to him to open their eyes. Within minutes of the clip spreading, the internet did what it always does. Screenshots started flying. Reaction pages uploaded the audio with dramatic captions. Fans who had followed every Von interview for years sat in the comments saying the same thing. This is longer than anything we heard before. Some admitted they had to pause the video because the weight of the words hit different when heard in full context. Others immediately started connecting it to old footage, old lives, and old moments where Von seemed more distant than usual. Herbo didn't rush through it either. He kept going. He explained how Von's tone changed as the conversation went deeper. At first it sounded like regular street talk. Then it became something heavier. Von started talking about patterns he was noticing. People who used to pull up consistently suddenly having excuses. Conversations that used to be open becoming short and careful. Herbo said he tried to play it cool in the moment, the way you do when your brother is venting. But looking back now, he realizes Von was trying to hand him a real warning. The reaction from the culture was instant and divided. One side of the timeline treated the revelation like missing evidence that finally surfaced. They said this is why so many people always felt the story around Von's final months was incomplete. The other side stayed cautious, reminding everyone that memory can shift over time and that private conversations are still private even when they get revealed years later. But the caution couldn't stop the momentum. The clip kept spreading. What made Herbo's account land harder was the way he spoke about his own feelings afterward. He admitted that at the time he didn't fully grasp how serious Von was. He thought it was just the usual paranoia that comes with the lifestyle. Only after everything happened did the words start replaying in his head differently. That honesty made the story feel less like content and more like a man still carrying something he couldn't put down. As more of the conversation details came out, fans began pulling up old timelines. They looked at the weeks leading up to Atlanta. They looked at who was around, who was posting, who went quiet. Every old clip of Vaughn laughing suddenly felt different when placed next to Herbo's description of that longer warning. The internet started doing what it does best, building a new version of the past with every new detail. Some pages claimed Herbo had shared even more off-camera that hasn't fully hit the public yet. Others said the version circulating is already the most complete account we've ever gotten from someone who was actually close to Vaughn in that period. Either way, the damage to the old narrative was done. The short, clean version of events that many people accepted for years now had a longer, heavier conversation sitting right in the middle of it. Herbo also touched on how Vaughn kept coming back to the idea of loyalty in that talk. Not the slogan version, the real version. The kind where you watch who moves when the money and the attention shift. Herbo said Vaughn wasn't accusing one specific person in a loud way. He was describing a feeling that something in the circle had changed, and he needed the people he trusted to notice it too. That distinction mattered to a lot of listeners. It made the warning feel more measured, and somehow more serious. By the time the first full wave of reaction settled, one thing was obvious. This wasn't going to be a one-day story. The length of the conversation Herbo revealed gave people too much new material to sit with. Every sentence was being clipped, slowed down, and debated. Some fans said they felt sick listening to it. Others said they felt validated. A smaller group stayed completely silent, which only made the rest of the timeline more suspicious. The conversation Herbo described didn't end with a dramatic mic drop line. According to him, it just trailed off the way real talks do when both people know the subject is heavier than either of them wants to fully face in that moment. Vaughn said what he needed to say. Herbo listened. And then life kept moving until it didn't. Now that the fuller version is out, the culture is left sitting with a longer shadow than before. The warning wasn't short. It wasn't simple. And the man who finally decided to share the full weight of it is still clearly affected by the words years later. As soon as the fuller version of the conversation started settling in, the reaction stopped being only about G. Herbo and King Vaughn. New voices began entering the timeline one after another, and every new name raised the temperature. The first major response came from Lil Durk's direction. It wasn't a long speech. It was a quiet story post that disappeared almost as fast as it went up. Black background. One short line about people finally speaking on things they stayed quiet about for years. No name was tagged, but the timing made the connection impossible to ignore. Fans immediately paired it next to Herbo's reveal. Some said Durk was showing respect. Others said the post felt like a warning of its own. The comments filled with people arguing over what finally speaking really meant. Within an hour, the screenshot had been saved and reposted across dozens of pages. The internet lost it for a moment, then kept scrolling for the next reaction. That next reaction came from Asian Doll. She went live for a short window late that night, voice low, lighting dim. She didn't play the full Herbo clip. She just spoke on how many people only start remembering conversations after the cameras turn on. She said Vaughn used to tell her things too, things she still doesn't feel the need to put on the internet for views. Then she ended the live without taking questions. The short clip of her statement spread anyway. Fans were shook by the tone more than the words. Some heard loyalty. Some heard shade aimed at Herbo for putting private talk on record. Either way, her name was now fully inside the story, and the division grew sharper. While those two responses were still being debated, Caleb posted. It was a simple photo of her and Vaughn from years earlier, no long caption, just a short sentence about blood and who really sat with him when the rooms were empty. The post didn't mention Herbo by name. It didn't have to. Coming right after the reveal, it landed like a quiet boundary. Some fans read it as her protecting the family's right to control the narrative. Others felt she was reminding everyone that outside voices, no matter how close they claim to be, still aren't blood. The comments under her post turned into a second battlefield. Old arguments about who truly held Vaughn down resurfaced with new energy. Then Boozy Badass entered the chat the way he always does. He went live with a blunt in hand and went straight at the situation. He said if Herbo is telling it, then it's out there now, and people need to stop acting surprised that these conversations existed. He added that Vaughn was the type to speak his mind when he felt something, And the fact that the full warning is longer than what the public first heard shouldn't shock anybody who understood the lifestyle. Boozy's live didn't calm anything. It poured more fuel. Clips of him speaking were immediately placed next to Herbo's original reveal, creating a new wave of reaction videos. Fans were shook all over again, this time arguing whether Boozy was supporting the reveal or just keeping his usual chaotic energy alive. The evidence layer started building at the same time. An old photo from a session began circulating again, this time with new captions claiming it was taken around the period Herbo described. A short, blurry Snapchat screenshot that had floated around years earlier got reposted with the claim that it matched the timeline of the longer conversation. Neither piece of content was new, but the context Herbo had just given made them feel fresh. Pages that specialize in Vaughn archives started threading everything together, adding timestamps and old quotes. Every new post carried the same energy. The warning was longer, the details were heavier, and the people who heard it back then are only now deciding how much to say. DJ Academics eventually addressed it on stream. He played parts of Herbo's words, paused, and let the chat run wild. He didn't claim to know the full truth. He simply pointed out that every time a new layer of Vaughn's final month surfaces, the same cycle repeats: shock, sides forming, old grievances reopening. The chat during that stream became a live war zone of opinions. Some viewers said Herbo did the culture a service by finally giving the longer version. Others said some conversations should stay buried for the sake of the people still here. Academics let both sides talk, which only kept the story trending longer. What tied all of these reactions together was the growing sense that the original short version of Vaughn's warning had never been the complete picture. Herbo's decision to share the fuller conversation forced every major name connected to Vaughn to either speak or stay noticeably quiet. The ones who spoke created new tension. The ones who stayed quiet created suspicion. Both outcomes kept the narrative moving forward. By the end of that wave, the story had expanded far beyond one man's recollection. It had become a chain of public responses, each one adding weight, each one pulling new people into the frame. The warning Vaughn gave was no longer just something Herbo carried. It was something the entire culture was now forced to sit with, longer and heavier than before. The longer the conversation stayed in circulation, the heavier the atmosphere became. What started as Herbo finally opening up about a private warning had now turned into a full cultural argument about memory, loyalty, and who gets to speak for the dead. Every new reaction added another layer, but the core weight still sat on those extra minutes of conversation that most people never knew existed. Vaughn hadn't given a short, clean caution. According to Herbo, he had sat there and walked through the feeling in detail, returning to the same uncomfortable points more than once, as if he needed the words to land properly. That length is what kept the story from cooling down. A short warning can be dismissed as a bad day or regular street talk. A longer one forces people to ask why the man felt the need to keep going. Fans began replaying the available audio in pieces, focusing on the pauses, the shifts in tone, the way Vaughn allegedly circled back to certain observations about the people around him. Some listeners said they could hear the fatigue in the description. Others said they heard clarity. Both groups agreed on one thing: this version felt more complete than anything released in the years right after his death. The division that formed in the first two waves only hardened. On one side were those who believed Herbo had done something necessary by giving the fuller account. They argued that the culture has a habit of shrinking complicated final months into simple slogans, and that a longer warning restores some of the real complexity. On the other side were those who felt some doors should stay closed. They pointed out that every new detail reopens pain for the family and the people who are actually there, and that public consumption of private grief has become too casual. The argument between those two positions played out across every platform without resolution. What made the moment different from previous Vaughn-related storms was the absence of a clean villain. No single person was being directly accused in the newly revealed conversation. Instead, the discomfort came from the atmosphere Vaughn described, the slow change in energy, the sense that loyalty was becoming conditional. That kind of warning is harder to dismiss and harder to weaponize cleanly. It sits in the middle of the timeline like unfinished business. People could project their own beliefs onto it, and many did. In the days that followed, the conversation began to stretch beyond the original reveal. Older interviews with other Chicago artists were re-examined for any similar hints. Old social media posts from the period were screenshotted and placed next to Herbo's words. The archive accounts worked overtime, trying to build a clearer picture of the weeks leading up to Atlanta. None of it produced a single smoking gun moment. All of it kept the pressure high. Every time the story seemed ready to quiet down, another page would post a fresh angle or a newly noticed detail, and the cycle would start again. The philosophical weight of the situation became impossible to ignore. At its center was a question the culture keeps returning to whenever a major name is lost too early. How much of a man's private fear and private clarity belongs to the public after he is gone? Herbo's decision to share the longer version forced that question into the open again. Some said the truth, even when incomplete, is better than permanent silence. Others said the dead cannot consent to having their most vulnerable conversations turned into content, no matter how respectfully it is framed. Both arguments carried real emotion. Neither side showed signs of backing down. Through it all, the original conversation continued to sit at the center like a stone. Vaughn had spoken longer than the public first knew. He had taken the time to explain a feeling that clearly troubled him. And the man he spoke to had carried those words for years before deciding the fuller version needed to be heard. That sequence alone was enough to keep the story alive. Everything else, the reactions, the sides, the archive digging, was the culture trying to process a heavier piece of information than it had been given before. In the end, the warning did not deliver a neat conclusion. It delivered length, detail, and an unresolved tension that still has no clean landing place. The people who wanted clear answers did not get them. The people who wanted the subject closed found it forced open again. And the rest of the timeline remained caught between respect for the dead and the hunger for every remaining piece of the story. King Von's final months already carried enough weight. The longer warning Herbo revealed added another layer that cannot be removed. Whether that layer brings clarity or only deeper conflict is something the culture is still deciding in real time. Now the only question left is where the story goes from here. More people may decide to speak. More details may surface. Or the silence that follows this wave may become its own kind of statement. Either way, the conversation is longer than it was last week, and the streets are still listening. Do you believe G. Herbo did the right thing by revealing the full length of Vaughn's warning, or should some conversations stay buried? And after hearing how much longer and heavier that talk actually was, does it change how you see Vaughn's final months, or does it only raise more questions that will never get clean answers? Drop your honest opinion below. No filter. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications so you don't miss what comes next. If more of the conversation surfaces or new voices step forward, we will be right here covering every part of it.